Hello everyone, Krista Lowe here, coming to you from Martinsburg, West Virginia. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I am a classroom teacher and I love to share as I learn things about the classroom, and I also love to learn from other teachers. And I have been talking over the last few days to a few teacher friends, and a common thing that's been coming up is determining what classroom procedures and what rules do you need for your classroom to run effectively. And I know that that's a concern that we all have. A belief that I have is, one of the ways for us to be the most effective teacher that we can possibly be is to be extremely good at classroom management. And before I became a teacher, that was a big fear of mine. I had so many what ifs. And I shared this quote, "Don't borrow worry from the future." And that was actually said to me. It was the summer before my first year of teaching. And I met a teacher who had been doing it a lot longer than I had. And I had a full list, guys. I had a big old notebook and I had question after question that I was drilling them about because I so badly wanted to be a good teacher. And I had a lot of what ifs in that notebook, and she looked at me and said, "Don't borrow worry from the future." And so teachers, I want to first encourage you to maybe not borrow worry from the future, but I would love to know, maybe in the comments below, if you're hopping on here, are you like me in that area? Like, I always tend to go to the worst case scenario. What could happen that is the worst, right? I've always been like that. I have no idea why. But I'm going to share some tips to maybe help you make sure that you're choosing rules and procedures for your classroom to help your year go by smoothly. So before I jump into that, again, thank you so much for watching. If you're hopping on here live, please feel free to comment live down below. Maybe tell me if you're a teacher or a homeschooling mama. We're all teachers, right? What you're preparing for this next school year. I would love to hear maybe what grade you're teaching or where you're teaching at. If you're watching this on replay, if you could just take the time to maybe comment #replay for me, and I would love to go back and I look at the comments to see who watched, so I'd appreciate that very much. And so are you like me? Do you borrow worry from the future? One of the things that I knew, like I said, to be an effective teacher, I had to have good classroom management. And I heard over and over again, procedures, right? Like, that was so super important. If you are a teacher and you've heard that before, maybe drop a 1 in the comments. Like, you've heard that over and over and over again too, right? Like, that procedures are important. But I sat there as I heard that said to me over and over again. I read books on teaching. I thought, well, how in the world do I know what procedures I need? I've never been a teacher, right? And based on the conversations I've been having over the past week, I know a lot of other teachers have that same concern too. Well, what procedures do I need? How do I decide what's important and what isn't? And so I'm going to kind of just give you a few tips on maybe how to make the decision for yourself. And the first thing I want to just mention briefly is rules. I know that's a question that I've seen coming up a lot, is what rules do I have in my classroom? Hey, Amy, she could teach us all, guys. But for rules that you have in your classroom, keep it simple. I don't have a big poster board with 10 rules listed out for my students to memorize. In fact, I just have 2 rules in my classroom. Rule number 1 is do not get out of your seat without permission. And rule number 2 is do not talk without permission. And those 2 rules are pretty simple, right? Would you agree they're simple? Maybe give me a hands up down in the comments. I didn't want the rules to be too overwhelming for my class. Most recommend that you only have 2 to 5. So maybe decide the most important rules and narrow it down to just a few. And then everything else in my classroom is based on procedures. Now, one of the reasons why I went to that teacher with a long list of questions, because I wanted to know, what do I do if this happens in my class? It was because I was, the class coming up into the year that I would be teaching, had a lot of boys in it, and I was so afraid that I would not be able to control them, to be honest with you. And my husband, and he's actually the principal of my school, he also gave great advice, and he said, "Krista, I promise you they are going to do whatever you expect from them." And so I decided that I would make it very, very clear to them based on my procedures what I expected from them, and we ended up having like the best year ever. It's still one of the most memorable classes to me. And so to decide what procedures you need, like I said, I was not super familiar with how the classroom was going to run. I still remember my first day. Is there any teachers that maybe you can tell me like you still remember your first day teaching too? I was so nervous, and I'm like a grown adult and I'm teaching third graders and fourth graders, and they're little people, but I still found myself so extremely nervous. And I remember what I wore. I remember how I was feeling. I remember looking into their eyes wondering, what do they think? What are they thinking about me? They're a crazy new teacher, right? But what I did was I started to think about my classroom day, and from the minute that they came into the classroom until the end of the day, and I started to think about every possible thing that takes place throughout the day, and then I decided what procedures I would want. So for instance, the first thing that happens, right, is your students enter class. Well, do you have a procedure for how you want them to enter class? When I first started teaching, I felt like that first bell rang and they had 10 minutes until the final bell rang, right? And I thought, man, they're kids. They need to be able to socialize a little bit. I know school day's long, so I'm going to let them kind of be casual when they come in, and I'm going to let them converse with each other. Well, after about 2 weeks, I'm not going to lie to you, I was super overwhelmed because besides just conversing with each other, they came to my desk. And not that I don't love them, of course I want them to come to me, but it was making my morning a little frazzled because I was trying to answer all the questions that were being thrown at me, and it just was not effective. And so I changed that. And so now when my students walk in the room, I teach them the procedure. I teach them where to hang up their backpack, where to put their lunch bag at. I teach them that when they get to their seat, right away, they put 2 pieces of paper in their folders, so that way they don't need paper later in the day. I teach them they have to sharpen 2 pencils every morning. And then when they get to their seat, they know they're supposed to prepare for the very first subject. And our first subject at my school is Bible, so they know to put their Bible out on their desk, and then they start working on whatever seat work I've already determined for them. This allows the morning to just go so much smoother, and it was a procedure I definitely wanted. So now every year I teach that procedure right away. Well, then think about other things. Think about, okay, when they do get up during the school day, sometimes they have to go get a journal or they need to turn in homework. Does it matter to you how they leave their desk and what direction they go to get to wherever the station they need to be at? I did not realize that was something that I needed to teach them. What was happening is my students were standing up out of their desk and say they needed to go to the backpack for some reason. Well, they were just cutting through all the other chairs. And if you understand, there's learning always taking place. So that was kind of disruptive for them to just go in any direction they wanted and not orderly walk down their aisle and go around to the area they need to go to. So that was a procedure that I learned. And then keep thinking about your day. Think about passing in papers. Do you have a certain way that you want to pass in papers? For me, many of my procedures are trying to cut back on distractions or opportunity for them to break those 2 rules, getting out of their seat without permission and talking without permission. So many of my procedures focus on that. Well, I found that when my students were passing papers back over their head and they would turn around and do whatever, it was kind of their little bit of a time to maybe play a little bit. Does any other teachers like you understand that? Anytime it seems like you switch from one thing to the next, that little few seconds is like their time that if you don't have good procedures in place, it can get chaotic just by changing one little thing. It's like that, guys, even as adults we're like that. Like, I don't know how many of you go to church, but in church, like, doesn't it seem like, when the preacher says stand up at the end, because he's going to dismiss us right away, it's blah, 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 like you start to hear a little chatter, right? So imagine if we do that, like children, it's even harder. And so now I have a different procedure for when my students pass their papers in. Instead of exchanging papers, maybe front to back, now I have students exchange papers side to side because that eliminated a reason or a time for them to get distracted. Think out your day like that. Do you want your students to be able to get out of their seat and sharpen their pencils whenever they want. Well, I don't. I want my students to be prepared. So I teach them the procedures of when they're allowed to sharpen pencils. And continue to think out your day like that. Think about each subject. What do they need for each subject? Do you want to have to tell them, oh, it's math class. Today you're going to need your math folder and your math book. You want to say that every time? Or would you like them to teach them a procedure? In my class, I say prepare for math. I teach them at the beginning of the year what prepare for math means. They know what folder they need to get, they know what books they need to get, and they know even where to place them on their desk. And then they know after they have gotten the material out, and they also know that means get it out quickly. So we don't play games, right? Like we don't have time because we really want to get all the knowledge that we can to them while we have them. So that's like another thing. And then they know what to do. They know to put their hands on their desk and look at me and wait for me to give them further instruction. That's what prepare means. And that little phrase prepare, I use that for a lot of things. We prepare for lunch. We prepare to go home at the end of the day. And I teach them all of those procedures. So really, when you hear people telling you over and over again, procedures, yes, they are so super important for you to have. They're going to make you be a better teacher. They're going to give great classroom management. People are going to come in and be impressed with how smoothly your classroom runs, but it's also really going to give a great environment for your students. They're going to know what to expect. They're not going to always have to be raising their hand and asking what's next, or what do we do for this, or what do we do for that. When we return from lunch, I teach them the procedure that girls go to the restroom first while boys sharpen pencils, and then when the girls return, they sharpen pencils and boys go to the restroom. They know when they go to their seat that language is the next subject, but if we're not ready to start teaching right away, they know that they're supposed to get out their seat work folder and find something to do. And I teach them at the beginning of the year what that means. And now, after a few weeks of school, I don't have to tell them anymore what to do. Literally, we walk back from lunch and my students start doing that. Is there any teachers, are you like me in that area? Like maybe put a 2 down in the comments if you understand just how much procedures can help you. So I hope that those tips maybe helped you. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message and I will answer you personally, and I'm happy to share any tips that I might have. If you have great advice about maybe procedures that you have, I was just thinking today, the first day of school, does anyone else have it where their students, yes, Amy, it's so important, where your students bring lots of school supplies that first day of school, right? I was just actually thinking earlier today that that's always a little hiccup the first day of school, as I'm having to tell the kids, okay, tissues go here, okay, this goes here, okay, this goes here. And I thought, why have I not made signs and like had it sitting out on the table so they know exactly where their stuff belongs? Like, I'm going to change that, right? I'm going to do it, change the procedure for that. So, and then I just want to, like I said, if you have any questions, I would be happy to share my procedures list with you. I actually have a handout that I give to my students, and that way they can keep it in their seat work folder. And if they ever happen to forget, it's in there and they know what to do. Hey, Hannah, I'm going to give you a virtual wave. But the last thing about procedures is just these 4 points. Is number 1, you have to teach them. Number 2, demonstrate them. So especially those first 2 weeks of school, understand that you're probably not you might have to adjust your lessons to give you extra time to get the procedures in there, but teach them. I love science. I also have them bring their stuff to open house, so they're all moved in before the first day. That is a great idea, Amy. I feel like there's a big percentage of my students that do bring it the first open house, but there's always some that don't, and so I'm answering questions for that. Or they bring like this big of a pad of notebook paper because they know they need it for the whole year, and they're trying to shove everything in their desk. Like, Hannah, have you ever had that happen? Where they just like bring so much stuff. So, but with those procedures, make sure that you teach them, make sure that you demonstrate them. So walk through it with them so they see what you're going to do. And again, expect this to take the first couple weeks of doing this over and over again. Model it for them so they see it, and then let them ask questions. And after you teach a procedure, if you teach in elementary school, you understand that that students have lots of questions. Sometimes you have to, when they have their hand up, you have to say, is this a question to me, or do you just want to talk to me? Because they have a lot of things that they want to say, but just rehearse and reinforce. And I hope that helped you. Like I said, if you need any tips or you want to see my list just to maybe help get some ideas. Amy, isn't it true? Oh yes, I have had that. Yeah, Hannah, I feel like first and second graders too, like in junior church, they're, oh, actually one girl, you would know who she is, but this Sunday in junior church, she raised her hand like 8 times. And every time I thought she needed something, but she did not. She just wanted to talk to me. Anyhow, which is so sweet. And that's a episode for another Facebook Live, is winning the heart of your students. And I definitely try hard every day to make sure that they get from me a look straight in the eye, and that I've listened to them at some point, because I know it's important to them to, you know, to be there for them in that area as well. But anyhow, I hope this video helped. I hope that you are having a fabulous summer. We're all gearing up for school. It's going to be here before we know it. And if you got any value from this, maybe put the word value down in the comments. I would appreciate it if you would share it with maybe friends that you, teacher friends that you think could use the information. And have a great night. Bye guys.